We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Wednesday. Kind of a busy day yesterday. A lot of shit went down, some sad stuff, some interesting stuff, some funny shit. So, we've got a lot to talk about. Of course, we know Jim Jordan did not get elected to be Speaker of the House, and we have more to talk about with regard to that. Some tragedy over in the Middle East, and Donnie Trump not living up to his requirements in terms of his gag order, whether he'll see any reaction from the judge by the things he said, or did he just come close to the line and not cross over it? I mean, the bottom line is he's going to at some point. So we'll have to see some kind of action out of his diarrhea of the mouth. He is, the guy is tactless. He's classless. He doesn't think about what he says. He just spews shit and it gets himself in trouble every time. Well, to start things off, we have one email, and this one comes from Eric. We hear from Eric from time to time. He's been on the show a number of times, so it's always good to hear from him. He says, "Hi, Mike. Well, Jim Jordan failed. It sounds like the Republicans are going to meet yet again and try to come up with a speaker. Chasing Oz, who's a creator on TikTok, reported that apparently a couple of Republicans said anonymously that they are considering supporting Hakeem Jeffries just to get a speaker in place. These Republicans keep embarrassing themselves, and I hope the voters are watching." Oh, yeah, they're watching. "I was hoping for a more detailed gag order or possibly Trump being held in contempt. While so far Trump is somehow containing himself, he isn't the only one talking. Don Jr., Eric Trump, and even Fox Non-News are still saying things that Donnie can't." And I noticed that too. That's interesting. Donnie's kind of walking it up to the line, saying what he can get away with. But Don Jr., and I saw him in a video, this guy, if he wasn't fucked up, if he wasn't on meth or crack or heroin, I don't know what he was on, but he was on something. He was slurring his words. He couldn't complete sentences. I mean, even worse than he normally is. There was something off with Don Jr. But all of these people have picked up the mantle here and start doing all the things that Donald Trump did. And I'm sure Donald Trump went to all these people and said, "I can't say this. So you start saying it," as if it does any good. See, that's the thing that always intrigued me when he talks badly about Jack Smith or Judge Chutkin or Judge Engeron. Uh, what does he think that's accomplishing? All it is provoking these people to put more stringent restrictions on them, on him. But it's not changing anybody's mind. Somehow in his mind, he thinks if I say this person is bad, everybody will believe it. Well, back in the day, in the early days of Donald Trump's presidency, there might have been some that believed it. Most wouldn't. But I don't even think those some are buying the shit now either, because he said so many things, none of which have come true. Now, the email continues. I saw a clip from Fox Non-News about the gag order, and it was basically nothing but Donnie's usual talking points about Biden wanting to jail him. His First Amendment rights being violated and the judges trying to be a king. It's all garbage. When will enough be enough? And places like Fox Non-News be required to quit treating opinions like facts and actually report the facts? Well, I don't know. We may have already gone down the rabbit hole with no way out. I don't know how we're going to put those kind of restrictions on the media once they haven't had it for so long. I don't know if we can ever get back there. The only thing we might be able to do is find another um, news source that decides to play it straight and hope against hope that people would be interested enough into watching it. See, we want to blame the news sources for this, and they're entitled to some blame. But the real blame goes to us. We don't want the serious news. We don't want the straight news. We want the turmoil, the trials, the tribulation, the scandal, the gossip. That's what interests us. And so that's why people watch Fox News or MSNBC or CNN or ONN. OAN, whatever the fuck it is. But that's why they watch these things. They like to hear what they want to hear, and then they can decide that it's true because somebody else told them it was true, and they want the interesting stuff. The hard news isn't always exciting, it isn't always sexy. And we as a public, as a consumers of media, we become pretty lazy. We don't want to think at all. We want other people to think for us. And frankly, that's what's happened. So we can blame the media, but we have to blame ourselves. If we don't consume this media and buy from their advertisers, it would just go away. But it flourishes. A place like Fox News or Newsmax, they're flourishing because people will watch and then they'll buy the products from their advertisers. It would be simple if we really don't like that the way the media is by just ignoring it, but that's on us, and we haven't done that as yet. Now, Eric goes on to say, you mentioned Mike Lindell having spent $300 million to support Donald's dumb assertion that the election was stolen. It got me thinking, between $787 million that Fox already lost and the $300 million that Lindell lost, that's over $1 billion. I wonder how many tens of billions that Donnie is going to eventually cost people and corporations that supported him. I wonder what future historians will say about all this money being wasted. It will be interesting to see what eventually is said about this period in American history. Yeah, history is not going to be very kind to Donald Trump or Republicans in general. And some of the more reasonable minded Republicans are starting to understand that and get that sense. This period, you want to talk about $1 billion being lost because people supporting Donald Trump. How about the million lives that died in COVID? I mean, over and above the money lost, that is going to be hung around Donald Trump's neck. Donald Trump, as president of the United States, should have done something when COVID started, the pandemic started, but he thought it would affect his chances of winning in 2020, so he just acted like it didn't exist. He said it was a hoax, it was a Democratic hoax, and Fauci didn't know what he was talking about. Well, there are still some people that believe that, but the fact of the matter is, over 1 million people died from this hoax. And because Donald Trump didn't do what he was supposed to do and the Republicans just followed in lockstep, 1 million people die. 1 billion people or $1 billion is lost. Donald Trump is probably the most disastrous human being that's ever been in this country. Nobody has been more prolific in committing crimes. Nobody has been more prolific in making missteps or mistakes or making bad choices. No one person has ever cost this country more money because of his fuck ups. And no one person has ever caused the death of this many people because of his negligence. I said one time, a long time ago, Donald Trump will be out of office and he will be in jail or whatever. But more importantly, he'll be broke and he will be a pariah in history. And I stand by that. I mean, I don't know how there's any way that it could be anything different. Donald Trump is a horrible person. And there's been nobody like him in this country. There has been no one person that has been anywhere near as destructive as Donald Trump. And as time goes on and the boomers die out and the Trump-a-fucks are gone, the millennials and the Gen Zs will recall these times. They'll recall the times that they grew up in, and they will tell their grandkids how tough it was and how crazy it was. But they will make sure that this doesn't happen again. This shouldn't have happened in the first place. But Donald Trump is like a disease. He is like cancer. Once he's let in, he spreads quickly and metastasizes on any number of people. And then they get so bought in that they have to just stand by Donald Trump. They would rather do that and destroy this country as opposed to being shown that they're wrong. These are people with emotional issues. These are people that are emotionally unstable. They're insecure folks that think the world is out to get them. So when Donald Trump comes around and says, I'll fight for you, they jump on board, whether he's right or wrong or sinful or whatever he is. Finally, somebody is going to fight for them. The thing about it is, he never fights for anybody but himself. And I still don't understand why some Trumplafucks have not grasped this as yet. He keeps asking them for money, telling them to get reelected or to pay for his legal fees and whatever. They seem to forget that he's telling them that he's a billionaire, but he needs your money. And when he takes your money, he doesn't give you back what you expect. It just goes into his pocket and he lives his lavish lifestyle. Somehow the Trumplafucks have not caught on to that yet. You have to be pretty stupid to be continually grifted by a guy, have him waste the money in front of you, and then ask you again, and then you go to your pockets one more time. The ignorance is palpable. And as I've said before, one of the most disappointing things I've realized since Donald Trump became president is the number of ignorant and stupid people and gullible people there are in this country. I always knew there were some, but I had no idea how many. And then once they've been sucked in and hoodwinked, how long is it going to take them to realize that they've been conned? There are people now, in spite of all we know and all we've heard from Donald Trump, that still believe his shit on my TikTok. I had somebody respond yesterday. I can't even remember what I was talking about. It had something to do with the Speaker of the House situation, which we'll talk more about. And somebody comes to my page and they say, I still don't believe you don't know how Biden has destroyed this country and he's a pedophile and he's all that and a bag of chips, you know, basically ripping Joe Biden and calling me an idiot for supporting him. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, if this was 3 years ago, maybe I could buy that you just didn't know any better. All the facts weren't out there. But here we are, all this time later, all the evidence laid out for everybody to see. Donald Trump failing at every turn, implicating himself, admitting to crimes. And this person has the audacity to write that. Now, clearly I blocked him because this guy is too stupid to be part of our little group here. But what's it going to take? I mean, how do you convince people that they're being hoodwinked or gaslit or whatever? I mean, this can happen right in front of their faces and they still don't get it. It's amazing to me, quite honestly. And that's what disturbs me so much since Donald Trump became president. I cannot believe how many stupid and gullible people there are and just how stupid and gullible they are in fact. They're not just average stupid and gullible. They are supremely, profoundly stupid and gullible. How do you get to be adult in this country and be that stupid? I just don't get it. I mean, you live your life, you learn some things. When you're younger, you might get taken for a ride here and there, but you learn from that and it never happens again. Apparently, these folks have some learning issues because they keep buying into the bullshit. Anyway, let's talk about something off politics. Well, it's kind of political, and but it's tragic. And we're talking about the war between Hamas and Israel. It's starting to heat up, and Joe Biden, as we speak right now, is headed over to Israel. By the time you hear this, Joe Biden will be there talking to people. And you're probably wondering why Joe Biden is going there. First, I'll tell you this. You know, they always get on Joe Biden. He never went to the border. He never went to do this place. Here's an interesting fact. Joe Biden in his career has gone to, as a politician, has gone to Israel more than any other politician. This goes back to when he was in the Senate. This goes back to when he was vice president. And this will be the second visit he's made as president of the United States. So to suggest, assuming the Republicans do that, suggest he doesn't care or he caused the war or whatever stupid shit they say. He's been over there more than any Republican by a long shot. And why is he going over there? Well, there's a few reasons for it. First of all, it has a little to do with the election. He needs to give the appearance that he's going over and he's concerned about Israel. That will help him in the election. The other thing is, hopefully, he's going to try to tame things down a little bit with some diplomacy or whatever. Hamas hits Israel. Israel immediately says, we're going to wipe out Hamas. And those motherfuckers mean it. They don't mess around. Now, if they do that and then Iran comes in and then Russia backs up Iran, we got a whole fucking mess here that America does not want to be involved in. But if it escalates to that level, we will have to be in. So when he goes there, he's going to try to talk to the Israelis and say, listen, I know this is horrible. I know you're devastated. I know you're angry, but you got to think further than the end of your nose, and you're going to have to cool this out. We need to find a way to stop this without an entire faction of people being wiped off the planet. Now, if Hamas got wiped off the planet, I'm cool with that. I'm perfectly fine with that. The only problem is that if they wipe Hamas off the earth, they're going to take a lot of innocent Palestinians yet. And as a president who actually does something, as opposed to what Donald Trump did in doing nothing about anything, he's got to try to smooth things out there a little bit. Now, whether he'll be able to do that or not, I don't know. But as president of the United States, he has to go there and try. And that's what he'll be doing. It'll be interesting to see how things go there. The interesting thing I found was that when he went to Ukraine, he didn't tell anybody beforehand. He just all of a sudden showed up, and he did that for security purposes. In this case, everybody knows he got on a plane and he's flying to Israel. Now, one of the other things that Joe Biden is probably thinking, he's thinking about that land invasion that Israel is planning, 300,000 troops. I'm sure he's thinking that as long as he's there, they aren't going to do it. So it'll give it a little time before that hits. Because if they start that ground invasion, that's when Iran's going to get pissed, and that's when Russia's going to get fired up, and then we have a big fucking mess. And Joe wants to try to avoid it. Now, there are a lot of deaths and atrocities going on in the Gaza Strip. But there was one yesterday that was particularly abhorrent. A massive blast rocked a Gaza City hospital packed with wounded and other Palestinians seeking shelter Tuesday, killing hundreds of people. The Hamas-run health ministry said that this happened and hundreds of people have died. Hamas blamed an Israeli airstrike, while the Israeli military said the hospital was hit by a rocket misfired by Palestinian militants. Who do you believe? Who do you believe? I mean, on the Israeli side, we had the president of Israel say that there are no Palestinians that are innocent. We know that when Israeli hits back on Hamas, there is going to be collateral damage. So did that missile come from Israel, or did that missile come as a misfire from Hamas? Both sides have every reason to lie, especially Hamas. But in the end, does it matter? If this war wasn't happening, those people would still be alive. It goes back to what I said before, collateral damage. And unfortunately, collateral damage in this case are innocent kids, elderly, families. Somebody's got to care about this. You would think Israel would. Hamas is a terrorist organization, so they're just using these people as human shields. But Israel, I can't imagine they intentionally bombed a hospital. I have to assume it was a mistake. Or if it wasn't a mistake, then that needs to be addressed. And hopefully Joe Biden will ask some questions when he gets there. Now, the Gaza Health Ministry said at least 500 people were killed. As rage spread through the region because of the hospital carnage, and with President Joe Biden heading to the Mideast in hopes of stopping the war from spreading, Jordan's foreign minister said his country canceled a regional summit scheduled for Wednesday in Amman, where Biden was to meet with Jordan's King Abdullah, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, and Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. The war between Israel and Hamas was pushing the region to the brink, Foreign Minister Safadi said, he told a state-run television. He said Jordan would host the summit only when everyone had agreed its purpose would be to stop the war, respect the humanity of the Palestinians, and deliver the aid they deserve. Biden will now only visit Israel, a White House official said. Now, I don't know if you saw any of the video of this missile attack on a hospital, but the explosion left just gruesome scenes. Video that the Associated Press confirmed was from the hospital showed fire engulfing the building and the hospital grounds strewn with torn bodies, many of them young children. The grass around them was strewn with blankets, school backpacks, and other belongings. The carnage unfolded as the U.S. tried to convince Israel to allow the delivery of supplies to desperate civilians, aid groups, and hospitals in the teeny Gaza Strip, which has been under complete siege since Hamas bombed southern Israel last week. Now, hospitals were on the verge of losing electricity while hundreds of thousands of increasingly desperate people searched for bread and water. Hamas called Tuesday's hospital blast a horrific massacre, saying it was caused by an Israeli strike. The Israeli military blamed Islamic Jihad, a smaller, more radical Palestinian militant group that often cooperates with Hamas in their shared struggle against Israel. The military said Islamic Jihad militants had fired a barrage of rockets near the hospital at the time that they had intelligence from multiple sources indicated it was responsible for the failed rocket launch that hit the hospital. Now, in a briefing with reporters, the chief Army spokesman, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, said the Army determined there was no Air Force, ground, or naval attacks in the area at the time of the blast, just before 7 p.m. He said radars detected outgoing rocket fire at the same moment and intercepted communications between militant groups indicating that the Islamic Jihad fired the rockets. That's conceivable. Hagari also shared aerial footage collected by military drones that showed a blast that was inconsistent with Israeli weaponry, with the explosion occurring in the parking lot outside the building. But again, regardless of whose fault it was, it's about the collateral damage, the children, the elderly, the families that died unnecessarily. I said this before. These wars are started by men and women that are working off their egos or are supported by somebody else. You have to believe Hamas has support of at least Iran. There's no way they make this attack on Israel unless they have some support, because they know Israel is going to come and wipe them out. There's no way Hamas can beat Israel. So when Netanyahu says they're going to wipe Hamas off the earth, you should believe him. That's conceivable. Israel is that strong. You know what's funny? When you look at the times we are looking at now, the war in Ukraine, the war in the Gaza Strip, all this violence connected with politics, with all these incendiary remarks being made, With all the turmoil, trials, and tribulations, the tragedies, the atrocities, this world seems to be going out of control, doesn't it? And basically, most of this stuff started, surprisingly, when Donald Trump became president. Now, I'm not saying that Donald Trump is directly responsible for each of these situations. Some of them he is, like the pandemic and like the insurrection on January 6, 2021. But it's interesting. Since he's been in office, the vibe in this world has been adversarial. I was talking to my wife about this yesterday. She was in a post office, and in this post office, the two people working behind the counter were talking about dealing with this one customer, and it got heated, and they argued pretty heavily with one another. And she was taken aback because we go into this post office all the time, never saw anything like that before. We knew the two people involved, and they're very nice people. Why does that happen when it's something that never happened before? Now, my wife and I have been in stores where that same thing happens, where coworkers will start arguing about something. My wife working with an airline, people walk up moments before their flight is ready to take off, and she says, "Listen, you're too late. The door is shut. You can't get on." What's the first thing they do? They get adversarial. "I'm getting on that flight." "No, you're not. Door's closed. You're not getting on." "Well, I can't believe you're not going to let me get on that flight. Every other airline would let me do it." "Well, that's not true." That's why they tell you to get there 2 hours ahead of time, because there's things you have to go through. You have to get your boarding pass. You have to go through security. You have to get to the gate. It all takes time. Now, if you just followed that rule, got there 2 hours instead of 15 minutes before, and then you can't get on the plane because you're at fault, but you're mad at the person behind the counter. This seems to be going on a lot. We know there's adversarial circumstances when we're talking about Trumplafucks and normal people. The Trumplafucks can't help themselves. They get mad, they get angry, and it turns not always violent, but it certainly turns adversarial. And then you think about this other story that we've talked about a little bit about this mom and a son that live in I don't know if it's a duplex or a apartment or whatever, and they happen to be Muslim. I'm not sure where they were from generally, but the landlord or somebody else in the building gets hyped up enough about it because of all this war activity in the Middle East. And he decides to walk upstairs and stab the kid 26 times, kill him, and stab the mom a number of times. And fortunately, she lived. Where's that coming from? Why is everybody so angry? You know, people talk to me about what I do on the podcast and on TikTok, and they go, "You're pretty fired up about this. You're pretty angry." And the fact is, I'm not angry. I'm trying to make a point. I'm trying to get people to listen. I'm not angry. I'm a pretty easygoing, laid back guy, but I also happen to be blunt. So sometimes when I say something bluntly, people think I'm angry. I'm not. I'm just stating a fact. But it seems everywhere you go, everybody is ready to fight. And for my money, the only possible reason for this is the vibe that entered this country when Donald Trump took office. He said from the beginning he loves chaos, he loves pitting people against one another, and he certainly has done that. Not just in politics, but everybody in this country. He's helped to divide this country, and everybody sees everybody else going after everybody else, and they think that's the thing to do. People who are seemingly adults acting like children. And it's happening everywhere you go, in stores, not only with coworkers, but with customers and people who work there. Nobody can take no for an answer. Nobody takes responsibility for anything. If I fuck up, it's your fault. And that seems to be the common thread in many of these interactions. My wife and my son were asking me, well, how do we change that? I don't know. I mean, we have to change the tone of this country, and having Biden in office is helpful. But really, what we need to do is take MAGA, Freedom Caucus, Donald Trump, and all the little Trump-la-fucks around him, take them out of the equation. Because the more they are in the equation, they keep stirring up this bullshit. My wife was a teacher for 30 years, and she knows this in a kind of a micro level, a microcosm, if you will. If you have a classroom that's pretty good, but you have one or two people causing all kinds of problems and chaos and interrupting, that vibe kind of spreads throughout the room. And now this normally good group of kids is starting to become unruly because one or two of them have started this whole thing. I mean, I guess they call it mob mentality. You know, it's like when we had the George Floyd riots. The Republicans love to say how Black Lives Matter caused all the problems. Well, we know that at least here in Minnesota, that's not the case because we have video footage of it. It turned out people would show up who happened to be white supremacists, and they would start breaking windows and start shit. And then it spreads throughout the crowd, and then everybody's violent. There are shit stirrers, people like Jim Jordan. They love the chaos, and they believe that once the chaos is there, they can figure their way out to get what they want. That's what Donald Trump does. That's what the Trump-la-fucks do. But as I've told you before, once we get rid of the Republicans in the House and the Senate, we can start to heal and start to do the things our government is supposed to do. But if you think it's going to change overnight and everything's going to be better, that's not true. It took us this long to get here. It may take us the same amount of time to get out of it. But we have to start that process. And as I said, the only way to do that is to take Trump-la-fucks and the whole ideology of fascism off the fucking table. We're working on that. We're getting closer to that, but we're not there yet. So we got to keep fighting, keep pushing, and get that out of the equation. And then we have to kind of heal from this ridiculousness we have in this country. All right. We will take a quick break and we will be right back. Well, we know that Judge Tanya Chutkan in Washington, D.C. issued a partial gag order against Donald Trump. She was very specific about what he couldn't talk about. He couldn't talk about the special prosecutor. He couldn't talk about witnesses, couldn't talk about the judge. He couldn't talk about everybody's staff. And if he did, there would be some retribution. Now, we don't know what that is. We also knew that as soon as Donald Trump heard this, he would be squawking like a stuck pig, which he is. We also presume that he's going to violate that order sometime soon. Now, in his squawking yesterday, he walked it up to the line, but he didn't quite cross over. But as Eric pointed out, we are hearing his toadies, whether it be Sean Hannity, Don Jr., Eric, or whoever else, they're saying the things that Donald Trump would be saying. Again, it goes back to what I said before. I don't know what they hope to accomplish. You keep telling us Jack Smith is a bad guy. So what? That doesn't change the court case. That doesn't change the evidence. You're still going to court and you're still going to be convicted. He somehow in his mind and has convinced other people that if we keep talking bad about him, everybody will believe it and then they'll just drop the case. Sorry, Donnie, that's not the way it's going to go. You're locked in. You're going on trial and you're going to lose. And you can keep yelling and screaming about these people that are in the process of investigating and prosecuting you but it's not going to do any good. Now, Trump tested the boundaries of the gag order that was imposed by the New York Judge Chutkan, and he tested the boundaries of the gag order that were issued by Judge Engoron in the Letitia James civil trial. See, that's where I think a lot of people get confused. Judge Chutkan, at the end of the pre-trial hearing, said, you can't talk about this, you can't talk about that. And then, of course, he goes and does it. Then in Letitia James' civil trial, Judge Engoron issued a partial gag order. So then when it went back to Washington, D.C., and Judge Chutkan, she said she was going to issue a gag rule. People took it as, well, he's already had one gag rule. Now he's got another one. They're just going to keep giving him gag rules. Well, there's two gag rules, one in New York with his civil trial, and now the one that Judge Chutkan just handed down. So what Donald Trump did yesterday at his civil suit, because he showed up again, he went there, but he didn't stay for the whole trial. He couldn't keep his attention long enough. He got too wound up and he had to go out and spew some more shit. Anyway, what he did, he shared an article that appears to show the home address of New York Attorney General Letitia James. Now, that doesn't break the gag order with Judge Chutkan. Question is, does it break the gag order with Judge Engoron in New York? The former president was prohibited earlier this month from commenting publicly about court staffers by State Supreme Court Justice Arthur Engoron after Trump disparaged a clerk on Truth Social. But Midas Touch Network noticed he shared a post by right-wing activist Laura Loomer that appeared to expose the Attorney General's home address. Now, why would he do that? Well, I'm sure he wants her to start getting threats and maybe people coming to her home so she drops all charges. Well, you don't know Letitia James then, because that's not going to happen. That's not going to work, but that doesn't stop him from fucking trying. The other thing, there's a technicality in this too. James is not a court staffer, and the court order did not refer to her directly, but as the person who filed the lawsuit against Trump and her associates, she is a central player. Now, Donald Trump said this: her fake case against me should be dropped immediately, Trump posted on Monday at 8:45 p.m. My financial statements are extremely conservative and her numbers were way off, including the fact that she undervalued Mar-a-Lago and Doral by billions of dollars. She also didn't reveal the 100% disclaimer clause in the front of the financial statements, and that she sued me under a statute that was never used before. Miscarriage of justice and election interference all wrapped up in one. This disclaimer clause, this makes me laugh. And it kind of goes to what we've seen before out of Donald Trump. Donald Trump will commit a crime, but he does it in front of everybody's faces. So that one doesn't count. It's not illegal because they did it right in front of you. And that's the same for this disclaimer clause. He has his financial statements, and then he puts a disclaimer going, yeah, these numbers might be right on, they might be a little off, so let's just let that slide. The point of it is though, you don't get a free pass if you admit up front that your statements are bullshit. It's still illegal to file false statements, whether you have a disclaimer on it or not. But in his head, he thinks he's off scot-free because he admitted that he lied on his financial statements, when in fact all that does is it makes it easier to prosecute that dumb motherfucker. Now, the Post linked to a Substack article published by Loomer that sketches out a tenuous link between James and Christian J. French, the Trump-hating COO and the heir to the anti-Trump regional news network, and which splashes screenshots of financial records that display what appears to be the attorney's home address in Brooklyn. If this turns out to be the case, how much interest did French and his anti-Trump family-owned progressive New York-based TV network earn in our government, Loomer wrote, calling on the state inspector general to investigate a loan she claims was fraudulently signed using an alias. Excuse me. Anyway, so Donald Trump sits in his court case, his civil court case, for a few hours, couple hours, and he couldn't handle it anymore. This guy has ADHD. He can't sit still. He's taking Adderall just to focus on tying his fucking shoes and changing his diaper. But he sits there and they're showing him evidence that he can't refute. And because he's in court, he can't say anything. This drives him nuts. He can't do anything at all. So now he goes out during the breaks or after the sessions and starts ripping into people. Only now he's got 2 gag orders. So he's trying to walk the line as best he can. So based on the things he says, I would have to think that Letitia James is now going to make a motion to the judge saying that he can't talk about or give away information about her or any of the other prosecutors in this case. I don't know why you didn't do that in the fucking first place, but that motion is going to have to be issued. And of course, Engeron will let it go and make sure that's part of the gag thing. See, Donald Trump thought that with these gag orders, they would take a retaliation right away. And then he would use that to gain sympathy and to fundraise and all that shit. Now, as much as we would like to see these people take action, put them in jail or put them in home lockdown, the fact of the matter is this might be better because they're taking away what he can say inch by inch. If they came right out and said, you can't say anything about anything, then Donald Trump would get some sympathy. Now, Donald Trump commits these violations or close to violations. They make a motion and they take that away from him. They'll keep doing that until they take everything away from him, and it'll be easier for people to palate in short bites as opposed to one big gag order. That may be part of what they're doing here. It'll be interesting to see what he does today, especially since he endorsed Jim Jordan to be Speaker of the House, and Jimmy didn't make it. And that's what we're going to talk about next. Yesterday was a big day. Jim Jordan had decided to take his case to the House floor and ask for a vote to elect him as Speaker of the House. Now, I've said all along, I don't think that he can get the votes at this point. But yesterday, or the day before, the media was talking like he was a shoo-in because he flipped a couple of people. Well, he had 20 people going against him in this particular vote. I sat there and watched the vote, and it was pretty close between Hakeem and Jordan for a time. And then when the first vote came for Steve Scalise, I go, here we go. And then when it was all said and done, there were 20 people who voted against Jim Jordan. Now, he needed 217 votes to win the speakership. He ended up getting 200 votes. He's 17 votes off. Here's how the voting went. Hakeem Jeffries got 212 votes. Jordan got 200 votes. McCarthy got 6 votes. Scalise got 7 votes. And other random Republicans pulled out of their asses got a total of 7 votes. So he's in rough shape here. That's a big hill to climb for Jim Jordan. I mean, he can only lose 4 votes, and he lost 20. And he was 17 short of winning the election. That's a hard thing to come back from. Now, the fact is that a lot of people believed he wouldn't get through on the first time through. But I don't think they ever imagined that it would be this far off. Now, keep in mind that Kevin McCarthy, when he took his first vote, he was 20 off. But he was able to wrangle some people and coerce people into voting for him. And ultimately, he just barely got in. It's a little different story with Jim Jordan. See, most people don't like Jim Jordan. And I'm not just talking about Democrats, I'm talking about Republicans as well. They don't like what he represents. They don't like that he's against democracy. He's tied to the big lie. All this shit. People just don't like him. But there's one guy named Ken Buck. He is a Republican and he's a conservative. He's not a Trump-la-fuck. And, you know, when he talks to the candidates, in this case, Jim Jordan, he wants to hear them say that Joe Biden won the election fair and square. Yeah, he's a Republican and he wants them to say that because he knows it's true. And if these people can't recognize it's true, then they're not going to get his vote. And the fact of the matter is, Jim Jordan didn't get Ken Buck's vote. But Ken Buck said something kind of interesting. He said he believes the second vote is going to be worse than the first. And the moderator he was talking to said, well, how can that be? Wouldn't he get better if he could talk to people and whip the votes? And what Buck said was that a lot of these people just acknowledged Jim Jordan by saying, I'll vote for you on the first election or the first vote, but after that, I'm not going to vote for you. So what Buck is saying is that with Jim Jordan losing by 20 the first time through, it's going to be by more on the second time through. And that would explain why Jim Jordan didn't have a second vote yesterday. They were talking about having the first vote, then maybe a second vote, maybe even a third vote, but they decided against that. They decided then to have the vote today at 11:30 Eastern time. So we'll see if they do it again. I'm not sure that they will. Yeah, they probably will. But the fact of the matter is this can do nothing but embarrass Jim Jordan if it's going to be worse. Now, apparently Jim Jordan is used to this because he's been embarrassed with everything he's fucking done since the Republicans took the majority in the House. So anyway, this vote is supposed to happen today. If he doesn't get in this time, there may not be a third vote. Now, Jim Jordan said, we're going to keep going. We had great conversations with great discussions with our colleagues. Frankly, no one in our conference wants to see any type of coalition government with the Democrats. Unfortunately, they may not have a choice. They're going to have to deal with the Democrats because the Republicans have proved they can't do anything on their own. They're too divided. They're not unified. So in the first test on the House floor, Jordan lost 20 of his fellow Republicans, a diverse group that included party moderates, members of the powerful House Appropriations Committee that oversees annual spending bills. Now, after initially planning a second vote Tuesday night, the second vote was postponed until late morning Wednesday, another sign Jordan needed more time to try to win votes. I don't know that it's going to do any good, but he's going to try. Remember, it took Kevin McCarthy 15 ballots to win the Speaker's gavel in January, though he started with what appeared a much stronger base of support than Jordan has. Jordan's an idiot. He's not legitimate. He's not a serious politician. And some of the serious Republicans know this, and they know how devastating it might be to this country to have somebody like Jim Jordan in charge. Now, as Chairman of the House Judiciary Committee this year, Jordan has done more to defend Donald Trump than any other Republican in Congress, running a series of hearings decrying the supposed weaponization of the government against the former president, who faces obviously multiple criminal indictments. Jordan was also closely involved in Trump's efforts to undo the 2020 presidential election. Most of the Republicans at this point are ready to be done with Donald Trump. He's proven to be a loser to their efforts. Anybody with common sense knows this. But Jim Jordan, the Freedom Caucus, the MAGA fucks, they don't care. They would prefer nothing happens. We have been without a Speaker of the House for 2 weeks, and it comes at a very inopportune time. We've got the war with Hamas and Israel. We've got the war with Ukraine and Russia, and we've got our own budgetary problems. We need to come together in the House of Representatives on a budget before mid-November, or the country will shut down. Here's what we know. MAGA, the Freedom Caucus, they're all for shutting down the government. Now, there's nothing good that can come from shutting down the government. It's just that these people want to create the shit show. That is their goal. And many Republicans know this of Jim Jordan. That's why they won't vote for Jim Jordan. They can't vote for Jim Jordan. A lot of these Republicans are from districts that maybe voted for Biden. So they have constituency that may not be as radical right as what the MAGA fucks are. And if they go there and they support Jim Jordan, they're going to go back to their districts and they're going to have all kinds of problems. Now, only a handful of Republicans publicly complained about Jordan's entanglement with the former president. More complained that Jordan undercut his colleague Steve Scalise, who had defeated Jordan in an internal party vote for the Speaker nomination last week, but withdrew from the contest 1 day later. That's the thing you got to understand. You've got a Republican contingent in the House of 222 people? But think about this. Kevin McCarthy is kicked out of his position as Speaker of the House. By who? By 8 MAGA fucks. Steve Scalise looks like the heir apparent, but he gets knocked down by 8 MAGA fuck votes. And then, of course, Jim Jordan gets elevated to the point he is now, where he's up for the election because of these same 8 MAGA fucks. You got to think that the Republicans at this point are getting tired of being dragged around with a ring in their nose by 8 to 10, maybe 20 crazy fucks. They've allowed them to do this for the last 7 years, and they've got to be getting tired of it, especially since they know if they do this, they're all but sunk in the 2024 election. Fact is, they're already sunk. They may not realize that, but they know it's going to be worse as long as Jim Jordan is at the helm. Now, Friday and over the weekend, his allies, including Fox News host and Republican strategist Sean Hannity, pressured the holdouts. Representative Kelly Armstrong of North Dakota explained that incentive for moderates to vote for Jordan, even if they don't like him. He's the best person to keep our government shut down and best person to keep conservative media off our backs as we face the shutdown. So what they're saying is we gotta elect Jim Jordan. Otherwise, the right-wing media is going to be all over us and we're going to have troubles in 2024. Now, Armstrong told Washington Post on Monday, while waiting until Wednesday gives Jordan more time to try to woo holdouts. But nobody likes the motherfucker, so I don't think it's going to help. It also leaves more time for those who voted against him to face pressure from outside groups. Well, I will tell you one thing. One of the reasons Jim Jordan wanted to have a public vote is because he felt like these people would be pressured and they would bend to the pressure and vote for him. Clearly, that didn't happen. And now that that bandage has been ripped off, do you think they're still scared? I don't think so. I think they're more likely, as we've heard, that there may be more people that will vote against him. Now, the pressure may have backfired in the case of some Republicans like Mario Diaz-Balart, Florida. I'm always open to negotiations and conversations, but the second that anybody tries to intimidate or pressure me, that's when my door closes, Diaz-Balart told reporters before the vote. Diaz-Balart wasn't the only one who may have felt that way. I've talked to a couple of members where they felt that just not what they needed. Representative Byron Donalds of Florida told Fox News. I think that some of the pressure campaigns have backfired. House Democrats, as expected, stuck with their leader, Hakeem Jeffries, during the floor vote, giving him 212 votes. And here's the interesting fact. If we were just going by votes in this particular ballot, Jeffries won 212, Jordan 200. Now, of course, we know you need 217 votes to be elected Speaker of the House. So it didn't do Jeffries any good, but somebody pointed something out. This is the 16th election for Speaker of the House where Hakeem Jeffries has received all of the Democratic votes and was the top vote getter in each ballot. That's the 15 times when Kevin McCarthy was being voted on, and now one time for Jim Jordan. And if there is, in fact, another ballot today, Jim Jeffries, I want to keep calling him Jim Jeffries. Jim Jeffries is a fucking comedy guy. Hakeem Jeffries. He will no doubt get 212 votes again. Now, we can tell the Republicans are getting a little desperate here. They're getting a little concerned. There's more talk about another option. Now, I know a lot of people are thinking, well, if just 5 people voted for Hakeem Jeffries, he'd be the Speaker of the House. That's not going to happen. You're not going to get Republicans to vote for Hakeem Jeffries, even if there are some people talking about doing that. But what could happen is 2 other things. The Republicans will go to the Democrats and say, we need to work together and get this done. They're going to fuck around with this for months and months, and the country's going to be shut down. We can't have that. So one of 2 things could happen. The Republicans could go to the Democrats and say, all right, we need to elect a Republican as Speaker of the House, but let's get one that's more reasonable. Somebody that is going to be satisfactory to both sides. That could happen. I don't know who that person is. It could be somebody like Bacon or somebody like that, somebody who's at least reasonably minded. It could even be Liz Cheney. There has been some talk of bringing her in, and the Democrats have talked about it too, and they'd probably be happy with Liz Cheney. She is ultra conservative. There's nothing the Democrats would agree with her about, but they know she has some integrity. And because of the work she did on the January 6th committee, they at least trust her. But there's one other thing that could happen, and it may be the most likely thing to happen. A lot of things have to come together for it to happen, but it could. If it appears the Republicans just cannot come up with a candidate who can get 217 votes, and I firmly believe they have nobody, the next step might be that Republicans and Democrats would get together and say, listen, here's what we do. We've got this interim Speaker of the House, McHenry. Let's give him enough power so we can get some work done, and then we'll see what happens with whoever ends up getting enough vote for the Speaker of the House. That may be the most logical choice because there's a lot that needs to be done. And McHenry was a buddy of Kevin McCarthy's. Kevin McCarthy recommended that he'd be the interim guy, and that's what happened. I wouldn't say you can trust him, but you can trust him a lot more than Jim Jordan or even Kevin McCarthy, because he would have limited powers, just enough powers to do the job. And that may be the most reasonable thing in the short term for them to do. We'll see what happens. We'll see if there's a vote today. And if there is, we'll see if Jim Jordan can win. But I don't think that's true. I don't think that's possible. Jordan just does not have the votes to do it. There's too many voting against him, and there may be more in the next ballot. So I think Jim Jordan's in some serious trouble. He's not going to be Speaker of the House. And if that ends up being true, thank God for that. That would be disastrous for this country. Now, again, like I said yesterday, don't get too upset about it, because he would have limited power, and he would have the rule of one person coming up asking for a vote of no confidence. So he'll have that hanging over his head. There's only so much he can do. And we know that Jim Jordan's a fuck up, so he will fuck up the job as Speaker of the House. But we have some real important things to deal with, and we need a serious Speaker of the House, at least to do the bare minimum. And that's where McHenry might come into play. Here's something interesting. We're going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast here in a bit. Donald Trump's co-defendants in Georgia, the racketeering case, are reportedly trying to pollute the jury pool ahead of their impending trial. They can do nothing but fight dirty. Now, the former president's campaign lawyers, Sidney Powell and Kenneth Chesebro, are slated to stand trial this month in Atlanta. Now, this month sounds like it's far away, but today is the 18th. They are to go on trial on the 23rd. We're talking 5 fucking days. What's that, next Monday? It's coming quick. And when that trial starts, there's going to be a lot of evidence revealed. And Donald Trump is going to lose his shit, because he will be seeing the future in this case. And the future does not look bright for Donald Trump. Now, a reporter, Jose Pagliari, wrote this: prosecutors and defense lawyers are trying to settle a fundamental question. How do you agree on a dozen fair-minded jurors when the Fulton County District Attorney claims that every Georgian was victimized by a plot to deny their vote? Well, it may be tough to get jurors that aren't tainted, but the fact of the matter is what she's saying is absolutely true. Now, a pretrial hearing Monday demonstrated how difficult answering that question might be, and the pair's attorneys want to conduct a highly irregular Gallup poll to survey how potential jurors feel about all the individuals who took part in Trump's effort to overturn his elections loss in the state, and they want to measure emotional reaction to the ex-president and his allies. Well, Fulton County is largely a blue county. How do you think they feel about Donald Trump after he incited an insurrection and tried to overthrow or undermine the election in Georgia? I'm sure they don't like that motherfucker. But that's not the court's fault. That's Donald Trump's fault. Powell's attorney, Brian Rafferty, said these are attitudinal type questions we would be able to use to test if they can in fact be fair and impartial. However, as Fulton County Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee reminded them, long-standing rules prohibit lawyers from essentially asking jurors how they would judge a case before they hear any evidence. We always had a hard line in the sand. We don't tell jurors to tell us how you'll vote, McAfee said. Part of the role of the questionnaire is to hone in on what matters. That doesn't throw out general standards you're allowed to ask jurors, period. We're not supposed to be asking jurors to give their opinions up front. What would be the point of that? If you're going to ask their opinions up front, why even have the trial? Why show the evidence? So that's not going to happen. The hearing signaled that Trump's co-defendants plan to employ the same disruptive strategies as the former president in his growing number of legal battles. I think it would be a mistake for any of us to treat this like a normal case, said Cheese Bros attorney Scott Grubman. Well, of course you would say that. I think the realities are really going to have to start sinking in here. This is not an ordinary case. It's not because of anything we did. It's because of how they charged it. Well, it is because of what you did. Your clients tried to overturn an election in Georgia. If what you're saying is that this has never been done before, it's because what your clients did had never been done before. That's not the court's fault. That's not the state of Georgia's fault. That's your criminal fucking clients. Now, I wouldn't be good on the jury because I have a preconceived notion, but I've seen evidence too. I've heard evidence and I've heard witnesses. The motherfuckers are guilty. They're going down. There's no question about it. No question. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about. Donald Trump was at his civil trial, and then he went out and started ranting in spite of his gag orders. Trump ranted about the value of his Mar-a-Lago resort outside the courtroom, bitterly complaining the property is worth $1.5 billion or more, even though his own real estate agent admitted it was worth a fraction of that. I don't know why he keeps honing on this. This isn't the point. The point is its value because he wanted to save money on taxes. The only way that property becomes more valuable is if he changes the status, and he can't do that now. It is not a private home. It is a club or a hotel, and that's why the value is the way it is. And that is that way because Donald Trump wanted it that way, and he wanted it that way because it saved him on fucking taxes. Now he wants to blame Letitia James for misquoting the value of Mar-a-Lago. Even if she did misquote it, that's not the point. That's not the point. The evidence of all the other things is enough to cause Donald Trump to lose this case. This is what Donald Trump does. He takes little bits and pieces here and there. He expands on it. He exaggerates it and thinks that's going to help him win. That's the frightening thing. Donald Trump is making all these strategies that just can't work. But somehow in his head, he thinks he can bullshit his way through, talk his way out of these things, and that these dumb ideas will work. Well, frankly, Donnie, they aren't. And nobody's going to side with you. You can cry and scream and rant and rave and pout and threaten, but you're still going to fucking lose because you did exactly what Letitia James says you did. We know this for many reasons. We know this because your company, the Trump Organization, was convicted of 17 fraud felonies, and you're the one running the company. So those convictions have to give us some sense of what's going to come out of this lawsuit. Donnie, you can keep flailing around, but it's not going to work. You fucking lost. You're done. And no matter how you try to delay or how you try to divert, you're fucking lost. And that's the way it's going to go. All right. We are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time out of your day. I hope you have a great day. We'll see what the vote does, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow.